welcome to the Solution Architect Show. Today, I'm super excited to having Mike to be on our show. Mike is an experienced enterprise architect. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Good, Ben. It's great to be here, and thanks for giving me this opportunity.
Cool. Maybe if this is just for everybody, like, how did you actually begin your career in IT?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask me that, and it made me feel really old thinking about it. I guess it goes all the way back to high school when in the 8-bit era with BBC Micros and Commodore 64s. And that's where I realized I had a real sort of interest in, I'd like to say, an aptitude for things technical and things IT. I went to university intending to do either medicine or engineering or possibly physics, ended up abandoning all of that, doing a computer science degree. And then I got a job out of uni for a bank as a Windows developer, coding layers on top of the mainframe to make the systems actually usable for people who didn't use mainframes. And it's just gone on from there, really.
Oh, cool. I guess the next question I'm going to ask is, how do you actually get into solution architecture? I got asked a lot of times, so maybe you can share your story.
Yeah, there's not one path into solution architecture, is there? And particularly as well into enterprise architecture. I guess we'll talk about that later on.
Yeah.
The thing I found really useful was I spent a lot of time contracting as a developer overseas in London and Melbourne. And the best thing I think that really set me up was working for either smaller teams within a large organization or smaller companies where you didn't have a defined role, where it wasn't like you are the developer, the middle tier developer or something like that. We really just had to get stuck in and work the full stack. If our database server fell over, it would be my job to rebuild it and rebuild the server from scratch and install the database and tune it on top. And I think that gave me a really good appreciation for the full stack from bottom to top. So I think it's being able to become a bit of a jack of all trades. And then I guess as well, it's being able to work in an organization where you are allowed to work out of your zone as well, as you move up your career path and get a little bit more experience, having the opportunity to work with solution architects, even if that's not in the title, so that you can actually start doing the work but before you take the step of having the word architect in your job title, because that's always the hardest jump to make, is to be able to sell yourself as a solution architect when you've never done it before. You've always got to have your best solution architect job.
Yeah. So I got asked a lot around how I transitioned. So I told most people I was forced to do the transition because I used to be a SharePoint developer. And you all know SharePoint now is only like a promoted as a SaaS solution. You don't do any customization. So I just forced myself into that role because it's provide a platform for technical people to learning those soft skills, really learning some skills that I call that high-paying, long-lasting skills rather than technical skills. A lot of them are quite short-lived. You just have to learning all the time. But I guess that's part of the fun. Coming back to that, so you touch on that a little bit. I think once you working in the solution architect for a while, and some people would aspire to become an enterprise architect, given that you kind of work in the enterprise architect. Can you tell me maybe the difference between a solution architect and enterprise architect and how you actually prepare yourself into that new role?
Yeah, I guess what I noticed as a solution architect, particularly in one or two of the roles I had, is that I guess if you put your blinkers on and say, this is my job as a solution architect, you're really focusing on the project or the piece of work that you're assigned to, and you're building up a solution architecture to satisfy the requirements of that project. But I noticed that I was often maybe looking to the next project and the project after that and where we were going in 2 or 3 years' time more than maybe some of my colleagues. And I think that's the skills to hone to become an enterprise architect, is starting to take that bigger picture, starting to go, well, after this project's done, and then when we do the next project and the project after, and then in 3 or 4 years' time, where are we actually going to be? And I suppose the other side of it, which you talked about just then, is it's very much the soft skills. You're no longer the technical expert in the room. You're the person who can drop it to any meeting and competently explain what's happening and how what you're doing and what your technical team are doing that's going to benefit the organization long term, and really why the business stakeholders with the purse strings should listen to you as the enterprise architect rather than necessarily the project manager who says this is just going to cost 20% more and make us delay the project 2 or 3 months. And the best time is when you've got that that positive tension is what I call it between everyone, where you're proposing a strategic solution and then maybe someone who's more project or finance focused is going, well, no, if we do that, it's going to cost too much and take too long. If it's a positive tension, then hopefully what happens is that you end up with a solution that maybe everyone's equally happy with or equally unhappy with. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's also a little bit more strategic. And being able to judge where you fit into that picture and when you're arguing something for the sake of it versus when it's actually a really important thing to get across is probably part of the key as well.
Yeah, just follow up on that. So I've been working as a enterprise architect for about 18 months where I'm doing a contract role. I guess how I find, that's my experience. I find maybe in the enterprise, people generally have a understanding of what solution architect do, maybe because we're working on project. They don't seem to have a good understanding of what enterprise architect do. Like I got asked a lot what you do. And I guess the next question is maybe when you are stepping up in that role, but how would you explain your role to someone like without this IT or maybe to the business stakeholder without this IT and architectural background? How would you explain to you like what you do?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it, Ben? And we don't do ourselves any favors because I find that if you put any adjective on architects, like a technical architect, a solution architect, business architect, often it depends on the place you work as to what that role actually means. So it is really, it's no wonder everyone's confused about what we do.
Yeah.
I guess how I try and explain it is that to me, it's all about understanding what my company does and then figuring out how to set the company up for success in the medium to long term, so in the sort of 2 to 3 year time frame, and how not to ensure that we don't paint ourselves into a corner, that we do maybe 2 or 3 really successful projects that are looking really good, but at the end of it, we discover that we've hit a dead end and we've got to start again. And so I guess that's how I'd describe my role. As long as the person's interested. If I'm at a barbecue, then I'll often just say, I go to lots of meetings.
Yeah, I think that's what my wife's, pretty much summary. Yeah, he doesn't do much work. He just go to meetings and prepare PowerPoint or review other people's PowerPoint. Yeah.
I work for an energy and a fuel company, and our CIO just admitted that his children think that he just pumps gas, that when he goes off to work, he goes to a service station and fills people's cars with gas.
He probably tired of explaining what his role is. If the children think of that way, he was just like, yeah, that's what dad do.
Yeah.
My next question would be, so you mentioned you've been in the developer contracting for a number of years, and then you step up into the solution architect role and then to the enterprise architect role. How have you grown your career over the years? And maybe talking about the challenges that you face and how you actually overcome those challenges along your career?
Yeah, I think I've been really lucky in the roles I've had where they've all been really good at nurturing my abilities at the right times. I think, certainly for enterprise architecture, it is, as we've talked about, much more important about the soft skills rather than the hard skills. The further up the levels of abstraction you run, the less you have to know how to do things. And even worse, I'd certainly for instance, my developer skills are long since atrophied. You'd never want me anywhere near actually coding anymore. And so you become more reliant on the people around you. You're acting as a mouthpiece for the solution architects, for the technical architects and engineers, and amplifying their views where their views make sense and learning from them. And the thing I focus on is more about understanding my business and understanding the business stakeholders, because I feel my job is to, first of all, be able to understand their point of view, be able to understand what they're trying to achieve, because unless you work for an IT vendor, IT doesn't make any money. It just allows other people to make money. So if you're not tightly in tune with the people who are actually making the money, then you're not going to deliver an effective outcome. So it's understanding the business and the business stakeholders. And then it's also being able to sell the idea that working with your IT group or your IT vendors or suppliers is a partnership where it's not a transactional thing where you just deliver the next project and hope it all comes together. It's about ensuring that together we're progressing the organization strategically. And that might cost a little bit more money up front, but it will deliver much more benefit later on.
Yeah, cool. I fully agree. I guess you mentioned about you lucky you get into position that sort of nurturing your skills at the right time. I'm keen to understand because from my experience, I got quite a few sort of really great mentors that popping up along the each stages of my career and really helped me to elevate myself. I'm keen to understand, do you have like mentors or maybe just a great manager that really help you to grow, get into the position that you are in now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm not that good at, first of all, identifying and finding mentors for me, for myself. And also I'm not that good at consciously building my career and building my skill set. I think to answer that question, I probably think more of the roles that I've had. A really good example is I worked for a company that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore because it's been bought to Gin. And a lot of my work was pre-sales solution architecture. And that's really where your role is to sell the company's vision and to sell the company's solution, but in an honest way. You're acting as a foil to the salesperson and often even correcting them and explaining that what the salesperson just said, we can't really achieve that quite in the way that they said it, but there are ways to do it, sort of thing. I think that's a great example where it really taught me, first of all, how to go about selling a vision, whether that vision's mine or not. By definition, it's my vision. And also really interesting insights into diversity. It's particularly in 2025, a bit of a bad word. And I've seen like government departments doing diversity for diversity's sake. At Edgerton, it was really clear. It was, if we're not diverse, we're not going to be innovative. If you've got the same sort of people who all think the same, then you come up with the same ideas and probably the same ideas as everyone else. I'm not sure where I was going with that, but I guess that was one time that was one thing that really, I suppose, taught me it's really important to listen to a wide range of people. Otherwise, if you listen to people who look and think like you, then you'll just get the same ideas and get a whole heap of groupthink.
Yeah, I think that could lead to the Wellington Architect Forum that you're organizing. So I guess if you don't really have a lot of mentors, but I think that forum would serve as a really great tool for a lot of people learning, sharing ideas as architect or try to become architect. Maybe you can shine some light on that forum that you organized.
Yeah, sure. So this is probably longer than I've been in Wellington. So it must be 15 or so years old, but it waxes and wanes because any group like that needs enthusiastic people who stay enthusiastic. There's no such thing as a group that gets to a certain point and becomes, I don't know, self-sustaining or self-managing. Over COVID, of course, any sort of group where everyone gets together really effectively died. And I know that earlier on, I got a lot of benefit from the Architect Forum. So I approached one of the organisers and said, look, I can see that this group's become quiet. Do you want me to try and reinvigorate it? And yeah, so now I think I've been running it about 3 years or so now. I've been deliberately keeping it as technology agnostic, I think there are plenty of Azure groups and AWS groups and Cisco groups, in particular different technology groups. But there's a gap where just the art of architecture with it going down a particular technology route is missing. And I think it's been reasonably successful. I've been able to find, I think, really good speakers, including yourself, Ben, and I'm very grateful for you coming along to our talk. And yeah, it's been building momentum, which I'm really happy about. Yeah, you can find us on LinkedIn or Meetup is the place. And if you're outside of Wellington, we do have a remote link every talk. So it's available to come and have a look.
Yeah, I'll also put the link in the podcast show note as well. I think that is
perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, it will be quite key to have such a almost a user group that where we can share ideas and just connect. It's a shame that Auckland doesn't quite have a consistent one. Like we got some sort of event that kind of being on and off, but not the one that Mike organized that being quite consistent over the years. I think that's another sort of challenge for people who want to stepping up their role. If you don't really have a group that you can lean on or ask questions and talk to people to see if this role is right for you, then it's hard for people get into that. I guess moving on, mentioned about for people who want to step in their role, right? I guess what advice would you give to someone who aspiring to grow into either the solution architect or enterprise architect role?
Yeah, I guess it's having the opportunity to do some of that work in your current role, particularly, first of all, to get that experience, and second of all, so that you can point to that in future job interviews. And yeah, like we've talked about, soft skills have really become the key thing. But it's also understanding whether you even want to do that. The downside of the role is you lose your deep technical knowledge. You have to become an inch deep and a mile wide instead of being the particular expert at the solution technology that you're working on. And not everyone wants to do that. There's no reason why you can't stay as someone who's deeply expert in a particular technology, a practitioner. So that's something you have to ask yourself. I know it's almost the expected thing that you go from, I don't know, developer or technical engineer to senior to dev lead to architect. But as you step through that, you've got to change the skills you do. And there's no reason that you have to. I think we've become more mature. I remember back in my day, the only career path was to become a people manager, which I think by and large, most or many technical people are just not suited for that. So it was a crazy thing to take someone who was a technical expert and make them have to manage people instead of being a technical expert. I think architecture has people a career path that doesn't have to involve becoming a middle manager, but also we're mature enough to recognize when someone has those really good deep technical skills and reward them as well. So I guess, yeah, I suppose that was a lot of words to say. Think about your career and make sure that you're not sleepwalking into an architect role, or for that matter, a team lead and manager role.
Yeah, it's definitely, you mentioned, it's definitely a role change. It's not a promotion. It's not I would say, a natural progression from a senior dev or principal dev into a architect. It's a role change, require you learn new skills. And also you mentioned also require you to park some of the skills that you've been handing on or you've been relying on for quite a number of years, especially the technical skills. But I guess on the other hand, I always say, as you mentioned about the people manager, so in tech, I would say there's two type of leadership. One is the people management route. The other one is the technical leadership, which is, I think, solution architect is part of their route. Tech leadership is a two-way door. Once you get into it, you can always coming back. I know Mike mentioned, you mentioned about you probably don't want people to let you to write code anymore. It's dangerous to know too much information. But I guess if you get paid enough and they want you to go back to the code, and after a while, you can definitely pick up those skills. I always say that having the coding skills, you learned like learning a bicycle or learning swimming. Once you master it, you know how to ride a bike or learn swim. But if you haven't done that for a while, you get pretty rusty on it. Like you might need a bit of time to, I wouldn't say retrain yourself. You just need to more practice. But you definitely not something you will forget. It's something that you just need to give in a bit of time to practice and getting those sort of skills back up again. But that's the thing also you mentioned, you need to make a conscious decision, like whether you really enjoy the technical and coding challenge or you want to step up more into I think it's probably more of the people challenge where you probably need to understand the technical concept or challenge and then translate that into something that non-technical people can understand, can digest, and can, based on the information, to make decisions. That's a really good way
I think if you'd have asked 30-year-old Mike, if he ever wanted to give up coding, you're going to be like, no way, that's just too much fun. There's no way I would ever get this up. But like we were saying, it's certainly something that's still in the back of my brain, but it's not something that I do as part of my day job.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost that separation it's a bit like when you see a project manager start to actually do some of the doing, you know that you're in trouble. And I think it's potentially the same thing, particularly as an enterprise architect, still to a certain extent as a solution architect. As soon as you're back on the tools, you're not focusing on your role, which is to be able to look at the overall patterns and design that the solution needs. You've immediately restricted your vision down to whatever you're actually working on. So it's not like it's impossible. And I know plenty of people who can chop and change between those environments. But it's a little bit of a red flag. You've got to be careful about it.
Yeah.
One of the other things you mentioned is like leadership and technical leadership. That's definitely something that I think you don't need manager, or for that matter, even architect in your title to show technical leadership. I think that's something that I think is key to architecture, because you're effectively leading the people around you towards the solution that you can see as the best solution. You're not doing it in the reporting line. You're doing it there. The sales there, being able to explain why your ideas are of benefit and going to be better for a particular stakeholder you're talking to. Be able to translate that into anything from the head of marketing, be able to explain why it benefits them, through to the developer who thinks that your ideas are a bit crazy and we should all do it this other way. So I think that's the leadership side of IT that doesn't necessarily need to involve management.
Yeah. I'm sorry. My daughter just came in. I'll just ask Cole. I'll edit this one out. Yeah. So that's really great. So I guess for any talk, given AI is really hard, like we can't really not talking about the elephant in the room. So how is AI reshaping the role of maybe solution architect or enterprise architect? And how are you adapting to those changes?
It's interesting. I think there's the recurring theme that I hear again and again. AI and LLMs are your enthusiastic junior or your enthusiastic intern that is highly productive and will go off and do stuff for you, but is often enthusiastically wrong as well. If you can use AI in that sense, but you have to understand enough to know when things are going wrong, then it can be very beneficial. The second recurring theme is that AI and LLMs, as we see them right now, is the worst that they'll ever be. They're only going to get better from here. The fascinating thing that everyone is hanging on is growth curve going to stop with LLMs. When is it going to hit a ceiling where the LLMs don't get significantly better anymore? The big question is, are the LLMs in their current form going to achieve singularity where they can design better LLMs? I think the answer is no. I think effectively an LLM is really a pattern predictor. The other thing that I feel like AI is creating a danger is that the way you use AI wrong is to take something that should be a diagram and a few bullet points and turn it into a 20-page white paper. And the people like architects say, we're using AI to build a 20-page options paper from a diagram and 4 bullet points. And then the consumer of that was using AI to take that 20-page document and turn it back into 4 bullet points in the diagram so they could absorb it. So we don't need to overcook things with the tool of AI. We can still be short and to the point. The third thing is the skill that won't necessarily be replaced by AI. It's about talking to the senior leaders and persuading them of your point of view, and also finding out what their strategy is so that you're aligning with it. That's something where a one-on-one conversation or a group conversation isn't going to go away with AI yet.
I fully agree. How we can survive in the AI age is just being more human, learn more human skills, as you mentioned about the soft skills. Nobody reads my architecture documentation apart from my peer architect, or when the project goes wrong and they try to blame me in my early career as a solution architect. Nobody really read your documentation. You really need to make the effort to summarize that to a few bullet points, maybe a diagram, and to that stakeholder, being a security manager, interest in the network and security view, and what are the risks that he need to understand. If you talking to the operational manager, he might only want to understand the new integration or the new platform that you introduce, whether we have the right support agreement put in, or whether his team got the right skill set, be able to support that. People, the right stakeholder, when they make decisions, they only digest a very small part of it, and they only really care about their part. And it's our role to making sure that everybody getting that picture so that they can understand why we're doing this, and this wouldn't giving them a headache down the track. It's all about communication, and you can't just relying on your email or documentation served communication. You have to actually engage with them and talk through this. Do you find the same?
Yeah, 100%. I think legal contracts, some owners of a small company I worked with a few years ago basically said, you come to an agreement with another party and you sign a legal contract, and then you put that contract away, never ever look at it again until things go wrong. And if you've pulled out the contract, that means the relationship has gone bad and you're having to revert back to the contract. And I guess in a way, those more detailed solution designs are similar. If everything works well on the project, then you're the verbal conduit between every different part of the organization, from the team, from the project sponsor, the business analyst, the network engineer, the developer. But it's only when things go wrong and they're looking to blame someone, that's when the overall solution architecture design comes out and they can point to it and go, look, this is why we failed and it's all your fault. So I guess it's maybe a similar analogy. I still think we overcook our designs to a certain extent, possibly for exactly that reason. It's so that when the project goes wrong, you can point to your design and go, it would have worked if everyone followed my 70-page document. I've been in organizations where I've needed to write 70-page designs. I've been in other organizations where a photo of a whiteboard diagram and a page of Confluence with a bit of a template there so that we didn't miss key points was sufficient. And I guess it's undercooked is better than overcooked. I tend to think you can always clarify the things that aren't quite well understood rather than having a document that's so verbose that nobody ever refers to it.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Mike. I think we reached the end of the podcast, and thanks for coming on the show and share your story.
Thanks so much, Ben. That was so much fun.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers.